Today's video is sponsored by Corel Painter 2021. Dear folks of the internet, thank you for clicking on my video. Today I'm creating a Halloween themed drawing in an art program that I've never used before, the new Corel Painter 2021. I've known about this program for years, but I don't have any actual experience using it. I do watch this amazing artist on YouTube called Cynic's Design, and he used Corel Painter for the majority of his art, so if you're intrigued, go check him out after this video, mind you. Especially his Witch Mercy speed paint. Gosh, what a beautiful rendering! So prior to making this video and trying Corel Painter for myself, I had this impression that Corel Painter was sort of the art program to use if you love traditional art, but you kinda love digital art more, so you wanna somehow do digital art, but you want it to look like traditional art. So turns out that is a huge part of what Corel Painter is, but I also discovered on my own that there are so much more to it than just being the digital but traditional but still digital artist preferred art program. That was hard to say. Why did I write it like that? In the most recent version of Corel Painter, which is the 2021 edition, released pretty recently actually, there has been a huge performance boost from the previous version. In fact, on Corel Painter's start screen, you'll be prompted to do a brush acceleration optimization. It sounds a bit crazy, but it's actually just Corel Painter figuring out how strong your computer is and adjusting the performance accordingly. So in short, it's a performance enhancement of the program for your specific computer specs to make sure that the program runs as smoothly as possible. So make sure to run this one first before you start painting. What you see here is my first test page after booting up Corel Painter for the first time. It's super chaotic and I literally spent an hour just going through all of the brush categories and trying them out. I found out I could easily copy brushes to a custom folder, so I just started hoarding the brushes I found most fun to use, like a true digital artist. This is actually quite an impressive amount of standard brushes, and there are some really interesting ones in between. I mean, look, that's thick paint right there. And that there is watercolor. Looks like I painted them directly on my screen. This is some galaxy brain level stuff. Don't worry, I'll come back to these, but let's get started on the drawing first. So I am definitely not done swinging Mokka around, guys, so she is the OC victim of today. In case you missed her introduction in some of my previous videos, she is part of an OC universe I started developing last month, and it has grown quite out of proportions, to say the least. She also has this very cartoony appearance, so I thought it would be perfect to try and paint her in Corel Painter using some of the natural medium brushes on her cartoony style. For the initial sketch, I used a brush called Real 2B Pencil. I found it under Pens and Pencils. If your stylus supports tilt, you can tilt it like an actual pencil and get a similar hatching result. When I started filling in the details on the sketch, I used a brush called Detail Bristle that I found under the Fast and Ornate brush category. It looks and works very similar to my own sketch brush, so I felt really comfortable using this one. Now that the sketch is done, time to move on to the line art. To line, I tried out a couple of different brushes. I tried the cover pencil, but it was a little too blurry when I scaled it up properly. Then I tried the flat color brush, but it was a bit too uneven for Mokka. I needed something cleaner, something sharp. A few brushes later, I found this one called Scratchboard Tool. I'm not sure what it means, but it is a cool brush. I found it under the Pen and Pencils category, and I really loved the variation and sharpness to it, so I used this to line the entire sketch. I was actually doubting whether or not I should create clean line art for this piece. I initially wanted to try a more loose painterly approach, but I still wanted Mokka to keep her cartoony edge. Eventually I made up my mind and wanted to approach this piece like I do every piece I make and use the natural medium brushes of Corel Painter to shade and for the background as well. So that's the process I will take you through. Also, I want to show you that Corel Painter isn't limited to creating fine art illustrations. You can also create stylized or even cartoony art here. So now the line art is done and it's time to move on to the next step, which is flat colors, or just the flats. During this process, I make a new layer for each flat color or area, so I can later lock the transparency to the individual layer, but I'll show you that once we get to it. For the flats, I brought in a reference of Mocha so I could pick off the colors, but instead of having her sitting in the middle of the canvas, I used this thing called the mixer. It is an actual color mixer, you know, like those you can get for oils and acrylics. You can pick up colors from your canvas and paint them directly into your mixer. You can also mix your mixer colors together to create even more colors. So it's your very own personal palette of colors, and you can treat it exactly like a real-life mixer. With the bonus of it being digital, so you don't actually have to clean it. You just hit the little reset button and boom, you have a clean mixer. While I was playing with the mixer, I discovered this other panel called Harmonies. So here I have picked up Mocha's skin color. And this little piece of brilliant color theory panel gives me a suggestion to colors that harmonize well with the color I picked up. I actually ended up using these cyan colors a lot in the final piece, and I hadn't even thought about the color scheme until I saw this. Talk about saving creative brain power, thank you. I want a panel like this in all art programs now. I mean an art program with inbuilt color harmonies. Yes, please. So moving on to doing the actual flats. I mainly used a mix of the flat color brush and the block eraser. But I also used the lasso tools to make some selections and fill them in with the paint bucket tool because I tend to get a bit lazy. And as you can see out here to the right, my layer collection is growing rapidly for each color flat that I'm making. This is my usual process, and I'm really happy I was able to do it this way in Corel Painter as well. Before moving on to the shading of the character, I want to establish the background and its colors, so I know kind of what color mood I'm going to shade with. For this specific part, I wanted to use some of Corel Painter's natural medium brushes. I thought a cartoony character against a more loosely painted background would look really awesome. So first I filled the entire background with a solid color. Then on the same layer with the captured bristle brush, I manually painted in a rough gradient. And then I used this brush called the blender bristle to blend the gradient more evenly. Both of these brushes imitate a real-life bristle brush. That's hard to say. Bristle brush. And they're super fun to work with. Then, still using the blender bristle brush. Then still using the blender bristle brush, I picked up the bright cyan color from my mixer and started painting directly onto the dark blue background. And as you can see, it behaves like traditional oils or acrylics. The first bit I put down is super bright and opaque, as if I picked the color right off the mixer and put it on the canvas. Then as I start moving the brush around, it blends itself with the paint underneath, merging the two colors together instead of just layering them on top of each other. I was able to achieve this ghostly fog in less than 5 minutes because I didn't have to do a lot of work. The brush did everything for me. I then went back to the flat color brush and painted in some dead trees in the background, you know, just to sprinkle it with some Halloween spirit. Then I went into the picture frame to paint a few spirits, and I just used the same brush for this. Initially I was playing around with an orange color scheme inside the picture frame, but it's going to change back to the cyan later. Time to return to Mocha and start shading. Corel Painter 2021 doesn't have clipping masks, to my big surprise. However, there are two easy ways you can achieve the same result, so no biggie. Either click the little icon here that says Preserve Transparency to lock your transparent pixels. It basically just means that you can't paint outside what's already on the layer. Just be aware that this toggles on and off for all of the layers at once. Or you can hold down Ctrl and click the thumbnail of the target layer and create an actual mask based on transparency by right-clicking. Then you have the same end result. I just used the simple Preserve Transparency option. It's what I usually refer to as alpha locking. From here on, I just shaded the character like I normally would by first painting in some rough shadows and highlights and then later blending them together smoothly. I mainly used the flat color brush to block out the shading and then the fine soft brush to blend them together. The fine soft brush leaves a little bit of texture behind, which looks really good as a contrast to the overall cartoony appearance. I won't bore you too much with the details during this step since it's a slow process. If you want to see everything, the full slow version is part of my upcoming term on Patreon. Then I went to work on the picture frame. I don't know what the logic behind this idea is, only that it is a haunted painting that Marka decides to stick her entire being through, causing the spirits trapped inside to gain access to the outer world. That was the very short story behind it. Everything from here is details, details, and more details. Adding small shadows here and there, brighten up some areas, and adding rim lights, because I'm a sucker for rim lights. And as a final touch, I played with Corel Painter's depth of field blur effect. I made a duplicate of the merged drawing and applied the effect to the entire layer. Then I used a regular layer mask to control where the blur was going to show and where the image should be sharp. This helps guide the focus points in the drawing a little better, especially towards her face. Now, let me spend a few short moments showing you what that thick paint and watercolor look like, because Corel Painter is known for its brush engine, and that's, by the way, just a smart word for how brushes behave. Remember when we painted the background and it looked like I was actually pushing paint around on the canvas? That's some really advanced brush behavior, and it can be super hard to get right, but it is what Corel Painter is known for. If you want to work with thick paint, you simply create a layer for thick paint and then use their thick paint or thick paint compatible brushes. They blend together very realistically, even when switching between multiple brushes. You can still do all the digital things like using the eraser or the color picker or combine with digital brushes. Same goes for watercolor. You create a watercolor layer, find your watercolor brushes and start painting. The paint even dries onto the paper like real watercolor. If this isn't freaking digital art magic, I don't know what it is. You can even adjust the paper's texture and graininess so it looks like your paint is on actual paper. If you prefer to work with watercolor brushes that doesn't behave as real, you can always choose to use the digital watercolor brushes. These are some examples of artwork created with Corel Painter. They're from their website, and as you can see, there are many different looks and techniques that you can use in this program. And before moving on, I just want to show you one last feature I found that I thought was really interesting. I found out that Corel Painter has this thing called AI style, short for artificial intelligence style. Basically, Corel Painter has learned how certain painting styles look like and can apply them to any sort of reference image. Here's a picture of my doggy Sugi. I then go to Window, Layout, and change to Photo Art. This little panel here appears, and what it allows you to do is stylize any given reference so it looks like it was drawn with a specific medium. Here I chose the soft pastels preset for Sugi, but there are many more and you can customize them too using the sliders underneath. Here's an example with the piece I just did. I am letting Corel Painter change it into a charcoal drawing. I know many digital artists use pictures as a base for the art, so this could be one way to get that initial painterly feel before painting over it. If you'd like to try Corel Painter for yourself, you can download the trial from Painter's website. It works with Windows as well as Mac, and if you do have a Mac and an iPad with an Apple Pencil, you can connect them so that you can use your iPad as a display tablet for your Mac. Corel Painter supports that. And if you'd like to own Corel Painter either right away or after the trial, please use the link in the description below because that is an affiliate link. So if my videos somehow help you discover Corel Painter and you just love it, consider using my link because then you'll be supporting my work as well. In fact, you also get a $100 discount on the full license for Corel Painter if you follow my link down below, just as a bonus because I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you gained some insight, got excited, and felt that Halloween spirit creeping in on you. And a huge thanks to Painter for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. Until next time, guys, take care. Bye!